Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Wait. Okay, so can I be heard or something?
Yes, I can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear
We
you.
can hear you.
Okay. Good. So good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Aldyn Veloso, and I'm a painter, a writer, and a student from Tacloban City, Leyte. I am currently 16 years old, and I am honored to be a guest speaker in this online forum on divorce, hosted by the Collegium Perulae Orientis, founded by my good friend Tyler Chua. Before I begin, I'd like to thank God for everything He has given me and to my parents, who has agreed to share their point of views regarding this subject of matter. And I would like to give my utmost gratitude to my dear friend Tyler Chua and the hosts of this forum for giving me such the opportunity to speak with you all. So I would like to share my screen if it's possible. Or okay. Okay, never mind. So opening statement. So divorce primarily is defined when a marriage is dissolved. When a married couple they separate from each other and they break their marriage vows. And it is a very necessary and thing to have Christ in your marriage, to have a Christ-centered marriage, because that's what primarily sustains the marriage. And that's what helps that primarily helped the marriage of my parents, having Christ in their relationship. So, with speaking of my parents, the way they had Christ in their marriage is when they loved each other very much, and then they were united by love, and also they loved the children, me and two other of my siblings, because I am the eldest in my family, and and that's where the fruits of marriages come true if you are dedicated enough to love your wife, your children, your grandparents, even if they cause you many hardships and many stresses in the day-to-day experience. I can see this through my parents personally because normally I'm like what they call a pasaway a child. So it's pretty normal to see my parents act that way. But in my part also, I try my best to be a good son too. So because I don't like to see my parents like they are very stressed or very sad because it doesn't like I don't know, it doesn't increase my happy mood and I don't like to see that also because it's really it's really sad. So, my father was 43, while my mother was 30 when they married each other. However, their choices and maturity, like the level of their maturity, obviously it is not enough to sustain a marriage. And it was my father's choice that he marry my mom, even if she had a baby already, which was me. Because to sum it up, my biological father and my mother, they had me. However, in the first few months, my biological father decided it would not be a good idea that he and my mother will marry. And it arrived in a state wherein it was just my mom who was suffering with a lot of things in life while she hadn't had me when I was still an infant. And the miracle is that my mom met my dad, which is her husband today. And even if I'm not related, biologically related to her husband, he still served as my father figure nevertheless, because even since the start, he was there for me, and then he was um basically like a father figure. So I was 9 months old when my parents got married in a civil wedding. And I was 1 year and 2 months when my parents got married inside the church. So that was in the year 2009. After which many challenges and hardships followed, but many good memories were also made along the way. An example of what hindered my parents' relationship was mostly financial related because basically my mom was a very materialistic person. She really liked to spend um money on a lot of things like bags, shoes, typical mother stuff. And while she was like that, my father, in the other hand, was the exact opposite. He was the type of person to be very economical and practical. He's the type of person who would put all his financial dealings in a budget, and he would always, and if he were in a store, he would try to buy the cheapest items possible because that was my dad. And because of the polar opposite personalities that my both my parents have possessed, it it has indeed led to conflicts usually. Excuse me. And it was during the adjusting period of my parents. However, despite the fact that my parents were having conflicts, arguments, fights over primarily financial matters, they always concluded with I know, forgiveness and understanding because despite all of that, they always placed the two ideas, forgiveness, understanding, and humility as their primary foundations. And personally, I think that's what sustained their marriage for more than a decade now. So even though my mom was a very materialistic and a spendy person, she was still a religious one. Actually, it was she was the one who was able to influence my father in becoming religious himself. Although both his parents and her parents were raised in good Catholic families. So, and another reason why my mother was very religious is because when I was younger, me and my youngest brother, we were always very sick. There were many times in a year where we would be able, I, it was either me or my little brother who would be admitted in the hospital. So, and my little brother had a lot of convulsions at that time. So it was really worrying for my mother because there would be just random moments wherein my little brother would just not breathe at all, and then his skin will turn purple, and then it's just really worrying. So it was a moment of panic of it. So yeah, that's another reason why a godless marriage, the concept of humility is non-existent. There will be arguments wherein the couple insults each other, and after that, the couple will give up on each other and end everything. Basically, I'm trying to point out that a godless marriage is not a secured one because only Christ brings security to everyone and everything, even in your married life. So, a godless marriage also, it is also a very individualistic one, which is not a good thing because the couple, the husband and the wife will only think of themselves. They will not consider the point of view of the other person. Therefore, it will lead to pride and the absolute zero understanding will happen between the couple. And especially this will be applied on the children as well. So if the parent fails to teach the children the nature of understanding and to forgive, then how much more the child and their future wife. So obviously it's a very daunting cycle. So and that I know. And another good thing is about the marriage of my parents is that both of them were raised in devout Catholic families. Basically, the reason why my father and my mother they chose to marry is because they were inspired by the fact that their parents themselves were together and then they never in their lives have they separated and they died under the sacrament of marriage. So, which was the primary thing that inspired them to be parents and uphold their legacy, which is another reason. And when and another and like I said, when they decided to marry, it was like a mature decision that they have already made, and the idea that they and they have placed Christ as their common ground between them because obviously my mom and my father, they were polar opposites. So I would like to talk about my personal connection in this sacramental marriage with my parents. Everything that I see in my parents' marriage truly inspires me to think that marriage is good, and the fact that all my siblings are happy and contented with each other, and the fact that I was very happy in my childhood too, with under God's grace. It can truly see the beauty of marriage, like because of how my parents treated me and then their utmost patience. It also inspires me myself to be a good husband and a good father in the future. So I would like to go to my point one already, which is divorce in society and my parents' perspective. So from my parents' perspective, because marriage needs sacrifice, so love is both a decision and a big sacrifice, because you have to do a lot of things and it is a total dedication to love. If you really love the person, you would literally, even your life, you will sacrifice it. Marriage should always be rooted in prayer. And if a person lacks the prayer life, if a person lacks the spiritual life, there will come a point where he or she won't feel the love at all and is in his heart. And by his or her heart it shall rest vanity and pride and uncharitableness. And divorce is a tremendous act of, like I said, individualism. Because marriage is to consider your partner and your children. And an example is when my mother complains that my father won't give her money or anything. My father sometimes doesn't understand my mom regarding financial matters. However, there are truly times indeed where my mother also unmindfully spends in random things too. If it's individualistic, the couple's usual argument is to blame each other and not humbly accept themselves at fault. However, at the same time, my parents will still try to understand each other's perspective and create solutions together. They think that divorce is so bad for society is because the first thing that are affected obviously are the children, and it is a pretty obvious fact at this point. And uh, and from my personal quote that Rizal obviously said that the children are the hope of the future, and the fact that divorce is very um prevalent in our society really undermines the quote of Jose Rizal, in which he says that the children are the hope of the future. Because the children, those who are under the parental separation and the trauma, they will grow up, like with a guilt in their hearts, and therefore it will lead them to degenerate acts because they're confused with their identity and they blame themselves for the trauma that was inflicted upon them. And they think that they're a horrible person and they do degenerate things to seek validation from others since their mother and their father were never there to give them validation that they wanted. Because of, as I said, yung mga kabataan, they are the primary victims of this. So it's really horrific to see that the future of a child will just be broken just because of a separation from the mother and the father, because it will indeed affect them psychologically, and it is not a good thing because this will definitely affect the future. A lot of people have already been affected by this. So, like economically, if they're poor and since the dad usually do not support the child in post-divorce, the mom has to work. So therefore, the child has to be left with either the grandparents or the yaya or the uncles and the aunts, which usually doesn't end well, if especially if with the uncle, because it can cause a lot of trauma and abuse, and this is in fact true. So I would like to make my point too, which is the nature of marriage from by my parents' perspective once again. So basically, When the parents love each other so much to the point they sacrifice a lot for each other, and the mom willingly gives birth to the children as a testament of their bond and love. And they take care of the children despite the hardships, the difficulties that they face. They are still dedicated to overcome the problems of their lives. And then they are willing to become good examples of their children to follow the good morals and to become very faithful Catholics, for example. And then the parents will also are willing to be the supreme role models of their children into thinking instilling in them the idea of the nature of procreation for the next generation. So I would like to point out my last point, which are things that affect marriage and the causes of divorce. So from my personal and most likely my parents' perspective is when there is absolutely no communication among the spouses because communication is highly important. It is the gateway to understanding and forgiveness towards each other. So I'd like to give a very short testimony on how I was raised in their marriage. So when I was a child, I was blessed enough to be used to see both of my parents together. Even if my mom's husband isn't my biological father, like I said, I still consider him such as my father because he was always there for me and he acted like a real father. Basically like a Saint Joseph Jesus relation. And because of that, I realized how significant it'll be if the marriage was Christ-centered, wherein my parents have placed God above all else, and how they have basically wholeheartedly and offered their marriage to him, and therefore they're doing really well despite the numerous bad days that has inflicted upon us. So, how my parents have shaped my views on marriage. So, as I have observed over the years how my parents loved each other and how they took care of us, it really opened my eyes on the beauty of marriage. Like, it really inspires me to become a good father when I'm older, like I said, not only because of how they love me, because of the compassion of my mother and the security of my father, wherein I felt a great peace of mind and solace, and they made me feel like a special person. Because of them, I felt like I am loved, and they inspired me to become a good parent to my children. What's even strange about that is that my father is not even my biological one. But because of his great love to my mother, he chose to love me. And I greatly appreciate that. So, regarding my biological father, he always loved me too. And in return, even if we didn't live together, he was there to financially support me and in my childhood days. I often met him during those days, and I also had good memories. And to be fair, I do not have any negative sentiment between any of my fathers because I love them very much. So I would like to make my conclusion of this topic is that divorce indeed takes a horrific effect in our society. And even if it's not legal under the Philippine Constitution, the cases of, couple separation are very high and can cause broken marriages, which will directly affect the children first and foremost. And that's all can be still seen in our society. And these are the true cause of the problem. The problem really is when we acknowledge that God is no longer rooted in every single thing that we do. Excuse me, wherein God is no longer present in our mornings, afternoons, and nights, not even if your gratitude and sorrow, and still we are not concerned whatsoever, is when we can safely say that we are destined to our total destruction in ourselves and in our very own homes. As the saying of Saint Josemaria Escriva goes, understand this well. There is something holy, something divine, hidden in the most ordinary situations, and it is up to each one of you to discover it. There is no other way. Either we find our Lord in ordinary, everyday life, or else we shall never find him. Sanctity isn't something for a privileged few. God calls all of us to be holy, to love him. Everyone, no matter where they are, no matter where their state, profession of job, or ordinary everyday life, devoid of human glamour, can be a path to holiness. So even in our love lives, our marriages, our pains, our sorrows, and our sufferings that stems from it, we must always offer it to the Lord, involve Him in all our endeavors, and he will always show us the way as long as we place our trust in Him and our faith in Him. For faith is a necessary aspect in our consciousness, and this applies to the romantic relationships and for the responsible parenthood. So I would like to say thank you so much, everybody, for your time and listening to my testimony of my personal experience living in a Catholic marriage. I'd like to thank Daniel Tyler Chua and John Paul Zaratariagan, all the hosts of the Academy, and magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.